Hi everyone, and thank you for tuning in today. We are going to be talking about how I just had a birthday last week. And that means I got more bike parts that I can show you. These are the double take adventure mirrors. Just kidding. We're not going to be talking about the double take mirrors today. Instead, we're going to talk about how, because I had a birthday and got a year older, I get to share another year of motorcycling wisdom with you. And so with that being said, let's talk about one of the wisest choices that you can make when you ride a motorcycle, and that's carrying a toolkit to make sure that you don't get stranded. Let's get going. I want to talk to you about what kind of tools you should carry on your motorcycle, specifically if you ride a dual sport or an adventure bike. All right, so before we start talking about what needs to be inside of your toolkit, let's first talk about why you might need a toolkit. And there are a lot of different philosophies when it comes to whether or not you need to carry a toolkit, how extensive that toolkit needs to be, so on and so forth. And those philosophies differ quite a bit, even among adventure riders themselves. Even more so, it differs a lot between people that ride off-road and people that ride on-road. First of all, most people that are riding adventure bikes are typically doing longer distance riding than I would say the majority of folks that ride street bikes. Now, I know I might get a lot of hate for saying something like that about the street riders, but I used to be one myself, and so I know from my own personal experience, I do a lot more miles on my big comfy adventure bike than I ever did on my street bike when I was just commuting to and from work and around town and some spirited rides every now and then. Another reason why an adventure bike rider or a dual sport rider might need a toolkit is because we're often riding more rugged terrain where our bikes are more likely to fall apart, things are more likely to break, simply because of the type of terrain that we're riding. The last reason why adventure riders need to carry a toolkit is because oftentimes the places that we're riding are a lot farther away from help than other types of riding would be. Look at where we are. There's really no one to be seen, no one to be found, and there certainly isn't a place where I could fix my bike if I didn't have a toolkit on me. Ironically, we decided to come out here to film today because this is the exact place where I did have something go wrong a few months ago, and thankfully, because I was carrying my toolkit, my tire plug kit, I was able to plug up my tire, fill it back up with air, and get home just fine. So a lot of us have things that might push us or might finally get us over the edge as far as deciding to build a toolkit. If you're lucky and you're smart, you build a toolkit before that moment ever comes in your life. However, that was not us. We were trying to leave to go camping one weekend, and 15 minutes into the trip, one of the bikes got a flat, and we were caught with no tools, no tubes, nothing. That was ultimately when we decided we need to have a way to fix simple things ourselves while we're out on the trail or out away from civilization or from other people, so that we're not left stranded. If you find yourself in that situation, or if you have found yourself in that situation, you might think that it's time to start building a toolkit as well. And you might be asking yourself, how extensive does that toolkit need to be? There are some folks that think that they need to carry everything under the sun that they need in order to rebuild their entire bike on the side of the trail. There are some folks that will only carry the bare minimum. So today we'll kind of explore where my philosophy has landed between those two and what I think that you should be carrying inside of your adventure toolkit. And really that can be broken down into three different categories. So the first category is going to be your general use items, things that you're going to use to fix the majority of things on your bike. Imagine, your handlebar clamps come loose, or you need to adjust your hand guard after taking a spill. These are the items that you're going to use to fix those things. The second category of items that you need to have in your toolkit deals specifically with tires and tubes. If you don't have a way to fix tires and tubes, I'm afraid that it might not make much sense to carry a toolkit at all, because those are some of the most common things that fail whenever you're off-road. And then the last category of things that you need to carry in your toolkit deals specifically with catastrophic incidents. Things that happen on the trail where you may not be able to get your bike out of the woods if you don't have your toolkit with you. We're gonna start pulling out the different pieces of it so that we can dive into it. Come around to the back of the bike. This is where I keep my primary toolkit. And I know in my last couple of videos, a lot of you have been asking about this bag, so I think a review is going to be coming soon on it, but it is a Nelson Rig Adventure Tail Bag. First thing that we have though is my actual tool roll. This is the Moscow Moto Pinner tool roll. Also, this little soft shell case. This holds my tire inflator. It's a battery operated inflator, so we'll be looking at that today as well. I also have Back here, something that I don't carry on my bike, but this is what we carry on the 250. So the Africa Twin has tubeless tires, and I decided a while back that I was going to be mean, and if we had to carry tubes for the 250, then Bree was going to have to carry it on her own bike. So we got her this Fender pack. We've also got in the tail bag up here, we've got a few tools. So again, if you watch my Moscow Moto Nomax review, you'll know that I keep my Leatherman up here, along with a few other accessories for the Leatherman. We've got the bit extender, and then we've also got the bit kits. So we'll briefly talk about those as well. And then now that we've actually got some tools pulled out, I can show you where I keep all of my tire kit per se. Your bike may not have a toolbox that's mounted exactly the same way. However, most motorcycles are going to have some sort of tool storage, whether it's under the seat. A lot of dual sports have the tool tubes on the side now. The Africa Twin's mounted toolbox lives right here. It sits directly over the battery. So I've got two 5mm bolts that hold this onto the bike right here. I'm going to use the Leatherman that I keep on the bike all the time as long as I have my tank bag to take those bolts out. All right, I got the bolts taken out of the toolbox. So we're just gonna remove it from the bike. Pretty nifty little toolbox on the Africa Twin, but it is not very big. I can show you how I managed to fit some important things in there though. First thing that we're gonna focus on is what lives inside the tool roll. I like to keep these extra straps on my tool roll. It helps keep the tool roll tight and condensed, but also gives me a couple of extra straps if I need to use those in any scenario. And I have had those come in useful before. Anyway, we will open up the Moscow Moto Pinner tool roll and start talking about what's in this thing. I have an 8mm, 10mm, 12mm, 13mm, and a 14mm wrench. These are some of the most common sizes that I would use on my motorcycle. You can customize these sizes as far as what you carry in your toolkit to be the best for your bike. These are my Allen keys that I keep, and this is actually a tool that I have a lot of redundancy with in my toolkit. This can change based on what you commonly use on your bike, but I've got a 3mm, 4mm, I've got a 5mm, and then a 6mm. I also recently added this little Torx wrench to my kit. It's just got like a star tip on it. This is required to adjust Moscow Moto luggage, and this is probably the most general use item that a general use item can be, but this is just a crescent wrench. Anything that my range of wrenches doesn't cover, I'm going to be able to get with this right here. And the handle works as a great storage spot for some electrical tape, which is also a good thing that you should have in your toolkit in case you need to do anything with any electrical wires or anything that might get damaged or cut in a fall, or just from wear and tear rubbing up against other parts of the bike. All right, last in general purpose or general use is a pair of vice grips. So here we've got a small pair of vice grips. These are really good to have. I've heard of a lot of different ways that you can use these in a toolkit. I've heard of people using these to replace levers if levers break. I've heard of people using them in order to replace your gear shifter or your foot brake lever, and works as a pair of pliers as well. So this is a really good and versatile thing that you should have in your toolkit. Another item that I carry for general use, this is my Leatherman Signal. You have a pocket knife on it. You've got several other tools. You also have a little bit driver right here, which is excellent. I also have the ratcheting bit extender or bit driver from Leatherman. This does a couple of things. First of all, it gives me a little extension. Secondly, it ratchets, which is super convenient. But third, and this is perhaps the most important thing, it allows me to adapt from the proprietary Leatherman bit to a standard 1/4" bit. And so I'm able to carry a lot stronger bits with me than just the Leatherman ones because they're not always true to size. This stays in the Moscow Moto bag and it's with me all the time. That way, if I need to use it to access my tire kit, I still have something to do that even if I don't have my toolkit on me. A lot of these are going to be special use in dealing specifically with taking tires off of motorcycles and trying to fix flats. But the first one that I have in here is a 1/2" drive 14mm Allen socket. This is for the front axle on the 250L. So if we need to take the front wheel off of the 250L in order to replace a tube or something, we have the socket for that. I also have the same thing for the Africa Twin. So this is a 17mm Allen with a 1/2" drive on back. I also carry a 3/8" drive to 1/2" drive adapter. And that also allows me to use this gigantic 27mm socket that works for the rear axle on the Africa Twin. The way that we get to the back wheel on the CRF 250L is with this Motion Pro tire iron that has a 24mm wrench. So this will cover the rear axle for the 250L. The nice thing about this is that Motion Pro also makes this little 3/8 inch drive socket adapter. So you can pop that into the wrench. And then again, if you use that adapter that I mentioned earlier, you now have a wrench that can handle any type of 1/2 inch drive tool, like my 27mm socket, or even the 14 or 17mm Allen sockets that I have for the front axles. In here, I also carry a few sockets just to make things a little bit easier and more convenient to work on. Sometimes you can't get everywhere you need to get to with a wrench. I carry the most common sizes for my bike. That's an 8mm, 10mm, 12mm, and 13mm. So I carry a 3/8 inch drive extension. And then I also carry a 1/4 inch drive ratchet and a 1/4 inch drive extension. And then I've also got a 1/4 inch drive to 3/8 inch drive extension here so that I can use all of my 3/8 drive sockets on this 1/4 inch ratchet. On this 1/4 inch ratchet. Okay, so that covers the majority of my general use or general purpose items that I like to carry on the motorcycle. Let's talk more about what I carry for dealing with tires. One of the things you've already seen, which is the Motion Pro T6 tire iron. I also carry 2 of the Motion Pro Enduro tire irons. Now, really I carry these for the 250L. This is a comprehensive toolkit for both bikes. Other things that I carry for tires, checking your tire pressure, so I've got a tire pressure gauge there. I also carry a valve core tool. I've had this come in handy in multiple scenarios. You can use this to clean out the thread if a valve core is leaking because the threads are dirty. You can also use this obviously to remove a valve core if you're changing a tube. A lot of tubes come with little caps for the valve stems that also have removers in them, but I've also seen those removers break pretty easily. So I like to carry a nice metal one in my toolkit just to make sure that I'm covered. All right, so next we are going to dive into this Fender pouch right here. Again, this is what I make Bree carry on the 250L if we go on long trips. The very first thing here that I have is a valve stem tool. You can use this to help pull the valve stem from a new tube through the wheel on a motorcycle. This helps tremendously, and honestly, that is my least favorite part of changing tires on tube-tired bikes. If I struggle with it in the garage, I'm gonna struggle with it on the trail too, so I might as well make the job as easy as possible for myself. I also have a small spray bottle of Dawn dish soap mixed with water to create kind of like a tire lubricant in case I need to reseat a bead. Beyond that, we obviously have the inner tubes in here. So this is the tube for the back of the 250L. So that's an 18-inch tube. I also carry a 21-inch tube as well. And then lastly in here, I also carry a couple of CO2 cartridges just in case of emergency. All right, so we talked about the tire kit that we keep on the 250L. Now let's talk about the tire kit that I keep on the Africa Twin. This is that little toolbox that came off of the bike just a couple minutes ago. In this, I keep everything that I need in order to plug the tires on the Africa Twin since it is tubeless. So I carry a little package of plugs. I carry the applicator for the plug. I carry the punch or the awl that you use to clean out a hole from a puncture. I have the CO2 cartridge head inflator thing. I also carry, again, just in case of emergency, a couple bottles of CO2, also wrapped in electrical tape, so another storage place for electrical tape there. Then I carry the small Park Tool plug kit. I actually don't carry this for the plugs. I carry this because it's a great little container that holds rubber cement and also some patches that I keep in there in case of emergency. I also keep a spare valve core in there just in case I might ever need to replace a valve core. And the last piece of kit that I keep on the bike if I'm carrying a toolkit is my inflator. So I carry the Fanttik X8 inflator, and then I bought this little soft shell case. Pull it out of the bag here. It's just a little battery powered inflator. It works great for motorcycles. I've had to use this in a pinch, and it's actually so convenient to use that I actually prefer using it around the house now instead of using my compressor if I'm just filling up tires or topping them off. This is the hose that it comes with, and this threads onto a valve stem. I found this to be a little bit inconvenient to use, so I went ahead and purchased their upgraded hose, which is more like a traditional like air chuck. And so when you actually get ready to use this, it's super simple. The hose that comes with it just threads into the very top of the device. Just thread that in. And then power on the device by holding the power button, and you get a screen that shows you the current pressure that's connected to the hose. And then it can also inflate to a specified pressure and turn itself off when it gets there. So really nice piece of kit. Honestly, it's not that expensive. I'll put a link in the description to this. And they also have a newer version of it that might be a little bit smaller with a better battery as well. So check that out if you are in need of a battery powered inflator. All right, the last category of items that you would want to carry in your toolkit if you're on a dual sport bike or an adventure bike, or maybe even on a street bike if you just want to be prepared, are the items that you would carry in case of catastrophic events. Now, when I talk about catastrophic events, what I'm talking about is you've laid your bike down in the woods or on the road and it is leaking oil out of one of the engine cases, or there is something preventing you from leaving the woods and getting your bike back home, even if it's just limping it back home. So the first thing that I carry in my kit in order to get me through those scenarios are zip ties. I have quite a few zip ties inside my kit. I've seen people literally put pegs back on their bikes that have broken off with zip ties. So I definitely carry zip ties. I also carry a Motion Pro Seal Mate. Mine is pretty torn up just from being thrown around in the toolkit here, but it will still work in a pinch. You'd use these in order to like clean dirt from under your fork seals or something like that if your fork seals start leaking while you're on a trip. They're fairly cheap. I need a new one, but you can pick these up pretty much at any motorcycle store. Of course, we already talked about the electrical tape. I also carry another thing that helps me fix electrical components, and that is something called solder shrink. So this is actually how most places or most people would do like a warranted repair to an OEM wiring harness, but basically it's got two wax rings, one on each side where you'd put the wires in on each side, and then it's got solder right in the middle that you can heat up with a lighter or something else. Once that solder melts, it fuses the wires that you put in on each side and can form a very reliable repair to a wire that's been cut. I do find it extremely important to carry something like this in your toolkit, especially if you ride a modern bike. There are so many sensors. If a sensor stops working, it can really put a damper on your day. And so it's good to carry something that can fix a wire that might break that would cause a sensor to stop working. Now there's a couple of other common things that I carry in order to make sure that I can make it out of the woods if I absolutely have to, or that I can limp home if I need to. I keep it inside of a case that I got for a mountain bike multi-tool, but it works great for this. So pop the cap open and you'll see that I keep my JB Quick in there. You can use this to repair, damaged engine parts or engine cases in a pinch if you absolutely need to. It's just a two-part epoxy. I've also seen people reattach foot pegs using quick weld. The last bit that I carry for catastrophic events is half of a steel stick. I cut this in half just so I didn't have to carry the entire steel stick with me. And then just make sure that you keep the cap for it though, because if this stuff does get exposed to air, it dries up and it goes bad. But steel stick can be used in the same way that the epoxy can be used in a lot of scenarios, but it's just like a putty instead of a two-part epoxy. It's not as strong as the epoxy, but you can use it to make repairs and patch up different pieces of, maybe your engine if you've punched a hole in one of the cases or something. There are a couple of items that are not in this toolkit that I would say that you might want to consider carrying if you are building your own toolkit. And some of these items are on my list of things that I want to get for my own toolkit. The first thing that I really need to add to my toolkit, and that you should definitely carry in yours, is some sort of mobile jump starter. I've been looking at the Tusk mini jump starter because it's going to do everything that I need it to do. I just need it to be small and I need it to be able to jump start a motorcycle. Some other things that you might consider carrying would be spare parts. I've definitely seen friends of mine that carry extra clutch levers, extra brake levers, and other types of things that affect the way that they control the bike. Those are the first things that are going to break if you fall or tip over on your bike. So carrying those parts can be very beneficial. The last thing that I can imagine that you might want to carry in your toolkit that I don't have here is like a trailside jack stand. Essentially, it is something that you can use in a pinch in order to, get the back wheel off the bike and make sure that the bike stays off the ground and stays level and doesn't fall over. If you made it this far, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, this is everything that I carry on my bike in order to make sure that I don't get stranded in the woods. I'm curious to know, if you already have a toolkit, what do you carry in yours? What other things should I be bringing with me? Let me know in the comments, and please don't forget to like and subscribe to get more content like this and more in-depth reviews.